on tonight. Tonight I'm going to talk about compatibility and chemistry. I actually had someone ask me this question recently about what actually creates chemistry between a couple. Just to touch on that first of all, so there's a range of theories out there, but most of them boil down to four common things that are needing to be involved in chemistry between two people. So chemistry is made up of physical chemistry, so that makes sense that you're going to be physically attracted to somebody. So it doesn't necessarily mean sexual chemistry, but this is just a physical interest in the other person. So there's something appealing about their physical being. Then there's emotional intimacy. So generally you would expect physical and emotional to go hand in hand because in order to be close to somebody physically, there needs to be a certain level of trust. And with that trust, there's also vulnerability. And that trust and vulnerability mean that you have a deeper connection at an emotional level. So that's the second part of chemistry. The next one is spiritual. So spiritual doesn't necessarily mean religious beliefs. While it can, and certainly people of the same faith often will be attracted to each other and they get a deep connection because of their common faith. But this could be simply environmentalism, it could be veganism, it could be a whole range of things that they have something that is their deep core values, their deep belief system. So it may not even involve God at all, but it certainly needs to be there. Now you don't need to have all of these, but certainly when you have each of these and in varying degrees, you're going to have more chemistry. But there's a difference between chemistry and compatibility. And look, sometimes they do get used interchangeably, but they're certainly very different. So compatibility, as most of you probably are aware, are things where you have things in common. So these might be values, they might be lifestyle choices. So say someone who's educated and is very liberally minded is probably going to be attracted to somebody else who's educated and liberally minded. Just like a hedonist is going to be attracted to another hedonist, or a religious nut is probably going to be attracted to another religious nut, because these people have things in common which makes them compatible. Now, in saying that, if you had someone like a priest and a stripper, they're probably not going to have a lot in common, so you would probably be safe to say that they would be incompatible. I know that's an extreme example, but when we talk about chemistry, so chemistry is not easily defined. As I said, there is those factors at the beginning, but it's quite often this unseen thing, and it's not something that science has even been able to put its finger on, because there's certain hormones, chemicals within our body that are involved in this whole process of having chemistry with somebody. So we have dopamine. So dopamine's like our reward drug. So people who are addicted to substances, that's the main reason they get addicted, because they get such a release of dopamine. All their dopamine receptors just go nuts. So, they need this constant reinforcement. But we also get this dopamine when we're in love, when we go through enjoyable activities, and not just sex, it can be anything. We get this release, so it's like our reward drug. Then you have testosterone and estrogen, which go hand in hand with sexual appetite for both men and women. And we also have serotonin. So serotonin is sort of our mood stabilizer. So the more serotonin you have, the happier you'll be. And that's why some people who need to have antidepressants, they don't produce enough serotonin to keep their mood stable, and that can be for a whole variety of reasons, but serotonin keeps our mood stable, and generally speaking, the more serotonin we have, the happier we are. So those four are the major ones within science that they measure when they look at people who have chemistry with each other. But what ignites it is still very much up for debate. So what one person sees as a spark in someone else, others just may not see. It could be the way they laugh, it could be the way they ask questions. So rather than being so superficial, they're actually asking thought-provoking questions. Could be a whole range of things. So science can't put an exact measure on who's going to have chemistry with who. It's very much an individual thing. Researchers have looked at speed dating in particular. So people may go in with a checklist to say, I want this quality, X, Y, Z, but they quite often don't even pick the person who has X, Y, Z because this chemistry seems to take over, and often the person doesn't have a lot of the qualities. So in saying that, when people are not compatible, that can become a really, really big issue, hi Ivan, because as we see in the world today, there's a lot of wars in the name of religion. So when people don't have the same lifestyle choices, they don't have the same moral values, compatibility becomes a huge issue. So as you can imagine, there's relationships where there's a high chemistry, but not necessarily high compatibility, and vice versa. Now, if people don't have a high chemistry, but they also have high compatibility, generally speaking, the relationship has reasonable chances of being successful. It may not have that intense passion. It may be a little bit more subdued in the emotional stakes, but that's not to say they're not happy either. But the reverse isn't quite such a healthy story. The relationships where there's a lot of chemistry and not much compatibility can become very toxic very quickly. On Wednesday, I'll talk a little bit more about where that healthy and toxic combination of chemistry and compatibility come into play, because it's something that, particularly if you've been in relationships where there has been high chemistry and not a lot of compatibility, and you could be saying things like, oh, it's okay, you explain away all their behaviour and condone a lot of behaviour that most friends would probably want to shake you and say, this is ridiculous, you can't be serious, you're going out with a convicted felon and he's married and has 3 children, and you're just like, no, but the feeling's there. So this is an example of what I mean by toxic relationships, where chemistry is really high and can really drive a lot of decisions that you make, and not healthy decisions, because the compatibility isn't there. Whereas compatibility and less chemistry will generally keep you a little safer, but obviously we also want to have some emotional intensity in our relationships as well. And again, that's not the case for everybody. Some people are quite happy with more subdued emotional responses. So that's a very, very, very brief overview of the difference between compatibility and chemistry. But as I said, on Wednesday I'll go into it a little bit more so that we can sort of look at, where we can come unstuck when we focus too much on one over the other. So look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday, and if you like it, share it out, and I will talk to you all soon.